Brandon Wells sat stone-still on the cold bench of courtroom 6B, hands folded like he'd been taught in basic training, tight controlled, unshaken. No one in that room, not even the bailiff, noticed the way his right eye twitched every time the judge spoke. They didn't see the tremble in his fingers when the gavel slammed like a shot fired too close to the head. And maybe that's the point. Nobody sees the things they're not ready to confront. But you are seeing this now, and I need you to remember exactly how it starts. Because once you hear what happened after that judge humiliated him in front of a full courtroom once, you realize what came next. You'll never look at justice the same way again. The judge had leaned forward like he'd been waiting for this moment his whole career. You think your service gives you special treatment in here, Mr. Wells. You wore a uniform. Now you think you wear a crown. The words hit like fists. Laughter rippled from the back, quiet, bitter, shameful. Brandon didn't flinch, didn't blink, but his mouth moved just barely, like he whispered something under his breath, something no one else could quite hear. Not the court reporter. Not his public defender. Not even the judge who just shredded him in front of strangers like some televised trial made for sport. But whatever he said, it changed the room. At first it was just a feeling like the air had thinned, like the paint on the walls suddenly aged 20 years. Someone in the gallery swore they heard a ticking clock that wasn't there 5 minutes ago. The lights flickered once, then steadied, and then he was gone. Not walked out, not escorted, gone. Chair still warm. Dog tags left on the table. Courtroom dead silent. No camera caught it. No record remains. But every person in that room swore they saw him sitting there 1 second, and the next nothing. And then came the knock. It wasn't at the courtroom door. It wasn't even in the building. It was you, at your front door. And when you opened it, there was nothing there. Just a single envelope. No address, no stamp. Just your name inside. A photo of Brandon Wells, in uniform, standing beside someone who hasn't been born yet. And beneath the photo, one handwritten sentence in red ink. He told me your name before he disappeared. So now tell me, do you remember hearing him whisper? Because the courtroom says no one did. But if you're still watching this, maybe you did. Maybe that's why your lights just flickered. Maybe that's why, for the last 10 minutes, your phone's been recording even though you never hit play. Maybe Brandon Wells didn't vanish. Maybe he's been waiting for you to ask the one question no one else dared to speak out loud. Why did the judge call him by a name he never gave? Brandon's name never left the court record, but the man, his body, his breath, his presence vanished like smoke through a keyhole. The judge recessed without comment. The bailiff sat down like nothing had happened, and when a reporter pulled up the footage that should have shown the moment he disappeared, it simply glitched. 3 seconds of distorted audio and a flash of static so loud it left a sharp ringing in her ears for hours. She said later, in a now-deleted interview, that she saw something in that flash. A figure, a face, maybe, not Brandon's, something older. She hasn't spoken publicly since, but you opened the envelope. You saw the photo. You saw your name in red ink, in a handwriting you swear you've never seen, and yet, somehow, you recognized. That night, your dreams turned glassy and heavy. Not nightmares, exactly, more like memories that didn't belong to you. A young girl sobbing on courthouse steps in 1967. A storm cellar filled with radios all tuned to dead air. A woman, wide mouth moving silently, tapping her finger against a courtroom wall that shouldn't have existed in the building's original blueprints. When you woke up, your phone had recorded 12 minutes of audio. You didn't touch it. No app had been opened. The file was labeled Wells_3RD bench_left.wav. When you played it, there was no voice, no movement, just the hum of fluorescent lights. And then, exactly at the 9-minute mark, your voice, whispering. He said the name wasn't his. He said it was borrowed. And now, you're not so sure about anything. You start pulling court transcripts, searching Brandon's name. But the further you go, the less you find. The case vanishes from online databases. Links 404. Archived articles blur his photo until it's just a smear of khaki and skin tone. You call the county clerk's office, and the woman who answers says she doesn't know any case by that number, then pauses, as if listening to something. When she speaks again, her voice sounds far away, like someone playing a cassette through a tunnel. She says, "You should talk to Miss Arlene. She remembers things that aren't hers." Then the line goes dead. You don't know anyone named Miss Arlene, but you check your contacts anyway, and there she is, Arlene Gentry. Last call, October 2022. Duration 3 minutes, 14 seconds. You have no memory of it. You drive 5 hours through cracked highways and pine tunnels to the return address on her profile. An old brick house just past the Georgia line. One window shattered and patched with duct tape. You knock. Silence. Then a rustle behind the curtain. She opens the door halfway, eyes bloodshot and scanning you like a threat. Her voice sounds smoked and sad. You saw the envelope. You nod. You don't know why, but you nod. She lets you in. The living room smells like iron and burnt plastic. A dozen radios sit along the mantel, all unplugged, walls covered in Polaroids. Most of them, blurred, all of them marked with dates that loop and April 14th, 1996. October 3rd, 1971. April 14th, 1996. She motions for you to sit, but doesn't take her eyes off you. You think you're the first one, she says. They come in waves. Always. After someone disappears, mid-trial, always after someone says the wrong name. You try to ask her who they are, but she cuts you off. No, don't talk yet, just listen. She walks over to a rusted cassette player and presses play. At first, just static. Then a soft voice, fragile, male. Brandon's. You think the court's real. You think the judge's name was Foster. That's not his name. That was my brother's name. He's been dead since 1985, but they made me wear it like a coat, and now it don't come off. Then a gasp. Then the sound of wood cracking. Like a door slamming open with no wind. You look up. Arlene's eyes are wet. He was my neighbor's boy, she says, trembling. I saw him die overseas. In Kandahar, but when I turned on the news a year later, there he was. Clean suit, no scars. Reading from a teleprompter like he'd always lived here. Said his name was Judge Foster. I called the VA. They said he'd never enlisted. She grips your wrist. You're not the one they want, but they'll use you to find him. You pull back. The room spins. You blink in. The tape player's gone, just gone. In its place, a small box labeled Wells_3 RD bench_left. The same name as your phone file. You stumble out of the house. Your phone buzzes. Unknown caller. When you answer, there's no voice, just the sound of a courtroom echo, and then a phrase, whispered low and wet like breath against your ear. Check the 7th page. That night, you open the envelope again. There is no 7th page. But under the flap, you find a second slip. Folded, brittle, yellowed. It's a court docket. Different year, different name. Defendant, Isaac Foster. Date, April 14th, 1996. You stare. It's the judge. His birth date is listed as 1951, but next to date of death, someone has scribbled, in red, pending, and you finally remember, not the courtroom, not the trial, but the feeling, the humming in your teeth that day at your cousin's funeral. The strange man who stood by the organ with his hand over his mouth, whispering, you thought it was grief. You thought he was nobody. But now you know you've seen him again, wearing a robe, holding a gavel, calling a name that wasn't Brandon's. You run the photo through metadata scanners. It's been corrupted. The date listed is 4 days from now. The GPS location, somewhere in Arkansas. A courthouse that burned down in 1998. You try to call Arlene back. Her number doesn't exist. You email the clerk's office again. Your message is returned but with an attachment. An audio file, labeled simply, do not open. You press play. It's your voice again. They were right. He didn't vanish. He just remembered who he was. And now, I can't forget. A click. A hiss. And then the sound of a door creaking slowly open. Not your door. But you hear your name whispered inside it. And now you don't sleep. You see shadows where nothing should cast them. You wake up to text messages you didn't send. One of them just reads, second bench from the left. Don't sit. You tear apart your house looking for bugs, for proof, for anything. And still nothing. Except your neighbor. He knocks on your door one morning, pale, sweating. He says his baby said your name in her sleep. She's only 6 months old. You ask him what name, she said. He swears, she whispered. The borrowed one. So now you have a choice. You can forget all this, shove the envelope in a drawer, and go back to pretending that Brandon Wells was just another veteran broken by the system. That the courtroom is just wood and law, not memory and manipulation. That judges don't wear faces that used to be other people. That your voice doesn't show up in recordings you never made. You can go to Arkansas. You can find the courthouse. The one they say burned down. The one your dreams keep taking you to. Where the hallway never ends and the benches are always full, but no one has a face. And maybe, just maybe, you'll finally hear what Brandon said. But if you do, don't repeat it, because once you say his name out loud, the gavel falls for you next, and someone new goes missing. You went, of course, you went. 3 days after the file whispered your name after the baby. After the second envelope slid under your door without a sound, you packed a bag. You don't remember packing and drove through the back roads of Arkansas, until the trees stopped looking like trees and more like dark arms trying to pull you into the sky. You didn't use GPS. You followed the location embedded in the corrupted photo, the one that had no business existing. You told no one. You just drove. Because deep down, something in you was already unraveling. You knew if you stayed, the forgetting would start, and if you forgot, you'd be next. But here's where the turn happens, because the courthouse wasn't ruins. It wasn't ashes. It stood tall, untouched, in a town that officially does not exist. No signs, no maps. One gas station run by a man who looked at you too long and didn't blink once. You asked where the courthouse was, pretending not to know. He said, you already been there. You think you forgot, but you didn't. You just crossed out the memory. Then he turned up the static on the radio. And it was playing something you swore you'd heard before, little girl humming, just off-key. Something from a dream. Something you thought was yours, but it wasn't. The courthouse was gray and silent, every window perfectly clean. No guards, no locked doors. You pushed one open, and it moaned like it remembered you. The inside smelled like the past old paper, hot dust, secrets sealed behind drywall. You heard nothing but the click of your own shoes. You walked past empty benches, a clock stuck at 3:17 p.m., and a wall of photographs, all faces blurred, except one, Brandon Wells, smiling, wearing a judge's robe. Beneath his photo, appointed April 14, 1996. The date loops back again. The burn site, the docket, the dreams. But Brandon would have been barely a teen in 1996. You start to feel something, slipping, not just logic, you, and then a voice behind you. I thought you'd come sooner. You turned, a woman, maybe late 30s, early 40s. Pale, tight curls, red sweatshirt with a faded Oakland A's logo. Her eyes didn't move the way eyes should. They twitched like a puppet's. Controlled, delayed. Her name was Claire, she said. Claire Owens. She told you she used to work here before the fire, back when the building was real. You asked if she meant literal fire or something else. She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled a cassette from her sleeve. It was labeled, Second Gavel. She said, this is what they won't digitize. You can't upload this. It erases itself from hard drives. You asked her what was on it. She said, something that was never said, but still heard. That's how it always starts. You pressed play. You didn't recognize the first voice, but you knew it anyway. Like a song you'd forgotten the lyrics to, but could still hum in your bones. The voice said, let the record show. The witness refused to identify himself, said he was not born but remembered, said his face was borrowed, that he had no fingerprints, only patterns. Then a rustle. Then Brandon's voice, broken, like glass underfoot. They used my name to open the door. I didn't know it then. I didn't know I was the key, but they put it on me. That's what they do. They assign a name, a date, a crime. Doesn't matter if you did it, doesn't even matter if it happened. It's the belief that stains you. And once you're stained, you open the door. The tape fizzled, then played backward, then forward again, but now it was your voice, saying, they told me I never sat in the courtroom, but I found my gum on the bench. You dropped the player. Claire didn't flinch. You stared at her. Who are you? She smiled. That depends. Who you're being today. Then she handed you a photo. The courtroom, full, alive, you, Brandon, and her all seated in the front row. All wearing the same expression, not fear, recognition, and that's when it hits something deeper than memory, the knowing, the sickness of truth. You've been here, not in this body maybe, not with this name. But this wasn't your first time. In this place you've seen this trial before, sat under different judges, heard different names called, that all, eventually, led to one thing. Disappearance. And the people who vanished, they were never erased, they were recycled, names reassigned, lives relabeled, truths inverted. You asked Claire how she escaped. She didn't answer, just stared at her own fingers, like they weren't hers anymore. Then she whispered, I don't think I ever did. I think I'm just the warning they leave behind. That night, in the motel, the audio file from your phone updated itself. Now it was 23 minutes long, but the strange part, it played backward. And when reversed, a conversation emerged. You and Brandon. You're asking him why they chose you. He replies, they didn't. You volunteered. You just forgot. The next morning, Claire was gone. Her photo on your phone was corrupted, her face now blurred, warped, bleeding into the wood of the courtroom walls like she'd been absorbed, but your photo on the courthouse wall had changed. Now, you were wearing the robe. Brandon's frame was empty, and the plaque said, appointed-pending, you vomited, in the sink. Your teeth bled. Your ears rang for 3 hours. Straight, the courthouse wouldn't let you leave. Every door led back to the courtroom, until you closed your eyes, and said the one name you weren't supposed to remember. The one your cousin whispered in the casket. The one you heard the baby say, the borrowed one. And that's when you woke up, in your own bed. Your phone clean. Your car parked, no tapes, no photos, no courthouse in Arkansas. Just silence. And that would have been enough. You could have believed it. Was trauma, stress, a psychological bleed. You could have convinced yourself of anything until you checked your voicemails. There was one new message. From Claire. It said, you only think it ended, but you left something behind. And now, it's wearing you. You rushed to the mirror, stared into your eyes, and for a split second, they twitched. Like a puppet. Just slightly, and your lips moved, but you didn't move them. They whispered, next. And the gavel fell again. To be continued, or remembered. You didn't scream. Not when your reflection whispered that word. Not when your own lips moved without your permission. You didn't scream because something in you had been waiting for that moment. Like you'd been walking toward it blindfolded for years. And now that the blindfold had slipped just a little, you finally saw the shape of what was waiting. But it wasn't relief. It was the kind of recognition that makes your blood turn. Still, because when you finally face it, you realize you've seen it before. You just weren't supposed to remember. The gavel falls again. But there's no courtroom now. No bench. Just your bedroom. Early morning, walls still humid from your breath. Sunlight crawling in too slow, like it's hesitating. You look in the mirror again. The twitch is gone. You say your name out loud. Nothing happens. You record yourself, play it back. Still your voice. Until the second playback, that's when your recorded voice hiccups just barely. Like the sentence stutters on a syllable that wasn't there before. You say, "My name is." The recording says, "My name was." You rewind, replay. It's clean. You play it on your laptop, your phone. You upload it to a cloud drive. And when you access it from another device, the glitch is gone. Back to normal. Until you download it again. And now it ends with a whisper. Return to page 7. There is no page 7. There never was. So you call the one person you haven't spoken to in years. Your brother. You don't ask him about the tape. You ask him something else. Something quiet. You ask, "Do you remember Mom's voice?" He pauses, then says, "I remember a voice." That stops you cold. You ask him to explain. He tells you something you don't want to hear. "I've had dreams lately. Dreams where she calls me a different name. Where she says we never left that house. That we're still in the basement. And every time I wake up, I find something new in the room. A photo, a receipt, an envelope. Addressed to me, but signed by someone named Brandon Wells. And suddenly, you feel like you're looking at your own memories from across a fogged window. There's something in them. Isn't there? Something that wasn't there before, but feels like it's always been there. You ask your brother if he remembers the courthouse. He says, "What courthouse?" You try to describe it. He interrupts. "Stop. I know that dream. That's not your dream. That's his." You ask who he is. Your brother hangs up. You try calling him back. His number doesn't exist anymore, but now, a voicemail appears on your phone from his number. You press play. The sound is muffled, distorted. Not his voice. Not anyone's voice. Just static and breath. And one sentence, "Do not sit second from the left." That's where the verdict starts. The fear now isn't that this is all real. The fear is that this is memory. That you didn't discover anything, you remembered it. That what's happening isn't a haunting, it's a relapse. And now comes the second character. His name is Richard. At least, that's what he says. He shows up at your door without knocking, middle-aged, uneven eyes. Says he used to work surveillance for the state but opted out in 2007. You don't remember inviting him? But he says you did. He shows you your handwriting scrawled on the back of a receipt from a gas station in Tennessee. Dated 2 days from now. He says, "You asked me to come when it started again." He tells you the trials aren't real, that they're replays. Loops that certain people are chosen to relive the moment justice dies over and over until they either break or forget. That Brandon Wells didn't disappear. He overrode someone. You ask him what that means. He smiles too wide. It means he took the robe, took the memory, and now someone else has to hold the verdict. You're the recess. You tell H, you didn't find them. They found you. It started subtle, just a shift in the comments on old message boards, forgotten forums you hadn't logged into since college. Someone responded to a 12-year-old thread you don't remember posting. Has anyone else heard the name Brandon Wells in their own voice? That was your username. That was your post. But you have no memory of writing it. The timestamp is dated October 17th, 2013, exactly the day your mother had her stroke. You'd always believed you were at the hospital that whole day. But the comment thread is deep, extensive, and full of people replying in a pattern that doesn't make sense unless you already know the code. The first reply, second bench, third echo. The court never ends. Did you bleed too? The next doesn't seem like nonsense until you realize each of them begins with letters that spell out the phrase. You were right all along. You read until your stomach turns. One user, named redfile.witness.24, posts a photo, the same courtroom you visited, but the photo is dated 1991, and you can see yourself in it. Younger, hair different, but undeniably you. You're seated in the second bench from the left, staring straight into the lens like you knew it was coming. The thread ends abruptly. With the message in all caps, the judgment moves when you speak. Stop posting. IT hears through text. Then the thread is locked. The entire board goes offline. You refresh. Gone. Domain not found. That night, you dream again, but this time, you're not alone. You see yourself in third person, sitting in that bench again, but the others are there now. Faces half lit, breathing synced like an ancient ritual. They all look toward a wall that wasn't there before, plaster, peeling back to reveal something not built by humans. A shape, a pulsing symbol that glows in and out like breath, and when you stare at it too long, you feel your name evaporating. Not your life, just your designation. As if you never had a label at all, only a borrowed one temporarily worn like skin. When you wake up, that shape is drawn into the condensation on your mirror. Not with a finger, something sharper, etched. And your phone is recording again. This time it's not your voice. It's dozens of them. layered, overlapping, saying your name, in unison, until the last one says, not him anymore. You begin receiving mail, not digital, handwritten, no return address, just envelopes, each postmarked from different states. The handwriting changes, but each contains the same thing. Courtroom, sketches charcoal, always in black showing, the same room, the same bench, different people, always one person circled in red. Each of them, in time, you begin to recognize. Your high school English teacher, a man who jumped in front of the subway on your morning commute 3 years ago, the barista who had a breakdown last month, muttering something about the trial that doesn't end. You Google them. Their obituaries say nothing unusual. In one photograph, an old yearbook. Scan uploaded to a local library database, you see it again. That symbol, carved faintly into the background of the class photo. No one noticed it then, but it was always there. You start to see it everywhere, under streetlights, in scratches on the elevator panel in your building, burned into toast, flickering in the grain of paused VHS footage. It appears not to be placed, but remembered. That's when the dream starts speaking in reverse. You wake up to notes on your desk, written in your handwriting, left by someone else. One reads, "We only forget when it chooses." The more you remember, the more you become it. Another, "They watch through us now." That's why our reflections move first. You begin to question what's real. You speak to your neighbor, the one whose baby whispered your name. You ask her if anything else strange has happened. She stares too long, then invites you inside. Her walls are covered in post-it notes. Every one bears a name. Not names of people, names of objects. Chair, sky, mouth, April. You ask why. She says, because they're changing the definitions. Every day, I write the names down to remember what things used to mean. Or maybe what they meant before the verdict. She then says a sentence you've never forgotten. They started with us, but they're moving outward. When words become unstable, memory collapses. That's how it spreads. You leave in silence. At home, you find a third message waiting, not a letter, a thumb drive. Inside, a folder labeled found footage from 20 years ago. A series of grainy, low-res security camera clips. You fast forward until something sticks. A courtroom, 2005. Judge Foster, Brandon Wells. And someone in the gallery, standing, approaching the bench, his face pixelated but the posture, the gait, the jacket. You two freeze the footage. There's a note embedded in the files. Metadata. This is what the government never released. You're not a witness. You're a repeat. Your pulse slows. The silence stretches. And then the footage plays without your command. You try to pause, to close, to shut down your system, but nothing responds. You watch yourself lean forward and whisper into Brandon's ear. You can't hear the words, but he looks up, terrified, and then he disappears. Suddenly, you know you weren't observing Brandon vanish. You caused it, not out of cruelty, not out of malice, but as part of a larger, unknowable sequence that rewrites itself with each recollection. The memory isn't a symptom. The memory is the disease. You try to explain this to someone, anyone, but the more you speak, the more your words fail. People stare at you, unblinking, wait for you to finish, then reply with sentences that don't connect, not because they don't understand, because they can't. Their words are placeholders now, like scripts corrupted mid-broadcast. But one person listens. The third perspective, a man who calls himself Elias. He says he's been documenting this for years, says there's a community of people who remember what no one else does. They call themselves echoes. They've existed since before language, before courtrooms, before names. He shows you the notebooks, hand-drawn maps, sketches of rooms that haven't been built yet, symbols that match yours, but inverted, twisted. He says those are the corrupted ones who tried to break the loop and failed. You ask him if there's a way out. He tells you, no, but there is a way through. You have to finish the memory. You have to let it end, even if that means accepting that who you think you are isn't. He places a photo on the table, a courtroom, a man seated at the bench. It's not Brandon, it's you. He says, you've been the judge this whole time. You just didn't want to sentence yourself, and the weight of it drops through you like a stone in a well. You ask him what happens if you do. He doesn't answer, just walks away. You call out after him. He turns only once and says, next time, don't forget to forget. And now, it's you again, staring at the bench, the second seat from the left. Empty. Waiting. You see the messages coming in again. Your inbox flooded with photos, dream journals, audio logs, people you've never met, people who recognize you, who whisper your name in their sleep. They write things like, he was in my courtroom too. I saw the same scar, same twitch, same sentence. If this reaches you, you're the last one left who remembers the original ruling. And in all of them, hidden deep in the metadata, one phrase repeats. The echoes are gathering. The judgment will unfold in the mirror. You check your reflection. You no longer twitch. Your eyes move first. And your lips begin to speak. But this time you hear not your voice. You hear all of them speaking through you. And they're saying, verdict confirmed. Pattern stable. Memory. Reseated. Proceed with the next, and then everything blinks. The screen goes dark, and in the stillness, one final message fades in. This isn't fiction. You just weren't supposed to remember it yet. End log. For now.